People still say that there are houses that are not abandoned because no one wants to live in them, but because the house itself has learned how to drive people away. At the end of the stone slope in the desolate hill region of Kisuang, there was such a house. It stood alone for dozens of years, pressed against the edge of the forest, its back leaning into a black cliff, its face turned toward the winding dirt road that stayed damp and cold all year round. When summer came, the trees around it were still green, birds still sang, mist still drifted by, yet the yard in front of the house was always gloomy, as if covered by an invisible layer of ash. When the rainy season came, water ran over the roof, down the walls, across the steps, but it never washed away the stale, fishy cold smell rising from inside, like the smell of an old mat used to wrap a corpse left too long in a sealed room. Children in the area were always dragged away quickly by adults whenever they passed by. Woodcutters caught outside at dusk never dared stand under that roof to shelter from the rain. There had been drunk men who scoffed loudly, saying it was only an old wooden house with stories villagers had made up to frighten each other. But men like that, if they were still alive by the next morning, usually never repeated what they had said. Some woke up with half their hair turned white. Some bit their own lips bloody in the night without realizing it. Some returned home and immediately nailed shut every window, then crouched in a corner for 3 days straight, eyes bulging as they stared at one spot as if waiting for something to step out of the darkness. Min had heard all those rumors vaguely as a child, the way people heard stories about a deep well that had swallowed someone, or an ancient banyan tree haunted by a hanging ghost. His father had never allowed him to ask further. Every time anyone mentioned the region of Kisuang, his father's face darkened, and the hand doing whatever work it held would pause for the briefest moment. Just enough for a child like Min to know that it was a name not to be touched. His father had left the village when he was still very young, carrying an old suitcase, a long scar on his side, and a fear he never once named. All his life he lived in the city, worked as a carpenter, rented cramped rooms, saved every coin, had no friends, and no relatives ever visited. Every year, on one exact day in the 7th lunar month, he would burn a bundle of old talismans in an iron basin set in the yard and sit watching the ashes fly until the last spark died. If asked, he would give only one answer: there are things you cannot escape simply by going far away. Min had never understood, until the day his father died. He passed after a short, violent illness and left little in the way of final words. But once the funeral was over, among the few belongings his father had left behind, Min found an oilcloth bundle hidden at the bottom of a wardrobe. Inside were land papers, a black iron key unusually heavy for its size, a few talismans browned with age, and a small sheet of paper folded into 4. The handwriting shaky as if it had been written when the hand no longer had enough strength. On the paper there was only one sentence: if you return to the house in Kisuang, no matter what happens, never ever open the locked door on the 2nd floor. When Min finished reading it, he felt more puzzled than frightened. In his eyes, a warning like that sounded more like the obsession of an old man than a real danger. He was drowning in debt from a failed business venture. The piece of land in the countryside, remote as it was, remained the only asset his father had left that could be sold. The calculation took him less than a day. The next morning he packed his things and took a bus back to Ki Suong with a simple plan: inspect the house, clean it up a little, find a buyer, sell it quickly, and return to the city. That was all. The road back was narrow, winding, and grew emptier the farther he went. From the district town, it took nearly 2 more hours on a rented motorbike to reach the village. When Min stopped in front of the small grocery shop at the village entrance to ask for the way up to the house of the Tran family, the woman behind the counter, who had been shelling roasted peanuts, abruptly froze. She looked at him with a searching gaze, as if looking at someone who had returned from very far away but still carried something of the past on him. "You're Mr. Kai's son?" "Yes." Her face immediately turned ashen. "He's dead?" "Yes. He just passed away." She fell silent for quite a while, then suddenly turned and fetched him a bottle of water from behind her without asking if he wanted to buy it. Without taking any money, her hand trembled slightly as she placed it on the table. "You can go up if you must, but don't stay after dark." Min gave a dismissive smile. "Why does everyone keep warning me like that?" The shopkeeper did not smile back, because most of the people who ignored that warning were no longer sane enough to tell anyone else about it. Min had never liked those half-spoken, half-hidden ways of frightening people. He gave a quick goodbye and rode on. From the village to the house was only a little over a kilometer. But the slope was steep, with dense bamboo and wild growth on both sides. The air was strangely cold. It was only early afternoon, yet the mist had already begun gathering into thin ribbons drifting between the tree trunks. When the house appeared after the last bend, Min instinctively tightened his grip on the handlebars. It was even more ominous than he had imagined. The house was built in an old style, 2 stories tall, stone walls, a tiled roof thick with moss, tall narrow windows like black cuts in the gray walls. Part of the wooden fence in front leaned broken. The weeds in the yard grew up to his knees, perhaps because it stood alone on an open patch of land beside the forest. With no human sounds around it, the entire house looked no different from a dried corpse that still refused to collapse. It made Min think of an ancient face with deep hollow eyes quietly watching the newcomer. The key his father had left opened both the gate and the front door. The moment the door swung inward, a wave of damp, heavy cold struck him full in the face. Not the natural cold of a house left empty for years, but a cold with something slimy in it, as if within the darkness beyond the doorway there was always the breath of something exhaling from a diseased throat. Inside it was dark and disturbingly still. Dust covered the floorboards, but not thickly. Most of the old furniture remained almost exactly where it had once stood. From the round table in the center of the living room to the glass cabinet against the wall, the long cushioned bench whose upholstery had rotted, and the standing pendulum clock in the corner, its hands frozen at exactly 3:17. Min stepped in, and the sound of his shoes echoed dryly on the floor as if inside a huge coffin. The smell in the house was strange. Besides old wood and mildew, there was another faintly unpleasant odor, like human hair being burned mixed with cloth shut too long inside a chest. He opened the windows on the first floor one by one, but somehow the light from outside seemed to be swallowed by something inside the house before it could reach far. The room remained dim, gray, and never truly bright. The altar room lay at the innermost end. On the altar there was only a cold incense bowl, 2 old candlesticks, and a faded red cloth hanging behind it. No portraits of the dead. No ancestral tablets. In the middle of the cloth was embroidered a strange circular symbol, like an eye stitched shut with black thread. Min only glanced at it and moved on. In any case, his purpose was not to uncover family history, but to inspect the house. The staircase to the second floor was narrow and steep. From the very first step, he had the distinct feeling that the upper floor was colder than the lower one. The air there stood still in an oppressive way, as if no one had stepped up there. No one had breathed there. No one had disturbed it for years. The hallway ran the length of the house, lined with 3 doors. The 2 outer doors stood ajar, revealing old bedrooms with rotted bedding, peeling wardrobes, and clouded mirrors. The middle door at the end of the hall was what made Min stop. It was utterly unlike the others. The wood was so dark it was nearly black, thicker than normal, and covered with countless fine scratches. Some deep, some shallow, like fingernail marks scraped over and over 1,000 times. The padlock was the size of a fist, rust black, fastened tight. Above the frame, scraps of yellow paper still clung here and there, perhaps remnants of old charms. Just standing in front of it, Min felt something rise in his throat, faint but unmistakable, as though his body's instincts were silently warning him. He remembered the note his father had left. This was the door. Min tried the handle. It did not budge. When he bent down to look at the crack beneath it, a sudden draft of cold slid out and touched his ankles, making him jerk back. On reflex, he crouched lower and pressed his ear against the wood. The other side was completely silent. But after a few seconds of holding his breath, he began to hear a vague, faint sound. It was slow and regular. Not insects, and not quite like wind either. It sounded like someone breathing in, then breathing out, just on the other side of the door. Min sprang to his feet. Goose flesh swept over both his arms. He scolded himself for imagining nonsense. A long abandoned house, wind through wall cracks, broken pipes, wood expanding and shrinking in damp weather. Anything could make sounds. He knew that. Still, he backed away, refused to look at the door again, and decided to go downstairs and clean first. As the sun began to slope westward, a man from the village named Hao, whom someone had recommended, came up to help him sweep away cobwebs and move some old furniture. Hao was tall, dark-skinned, rough-looking, and spoke little, but the instant he stepped into the second floor hall and saw the locked door, his face changed. The broom in his hand halted in midair. "That room is still locked? You know about it?" Min asked. Hao looked at him as though the question were absurd. "Everyone around here knows. What's inside?" The man swallowed, avoiding his gaze. "No one wants to know." Min gave a short laugh. "I thought it was just a storage room." Hao set the broom down. He did not laugh. "If I were you, I'd sell the house without setting foot on this floor a second time." After that, he refused to touch the stretch of hallway near the door, cleaned only the first floor, and hurried to leave before dark. At the gate, he turned back and said one thing that Min remembered word for word all through the night. If someone calls your name from behind that door at night, don't answer. No matter whose voice it is, don't answer. Night fell faster than Min had expected. Clouds rolled down from the forest. The air grew heavy, and rain began around 8. The whole house drowned in the pounding of rain on the old tiles. The electricity flickered, the light bulb brightening and dimming as if about to die. Min ate something simple and told himself he would sleep one night and go down to town in the morning to find a broker. He chose to sleep in the outermost bedroom upstairs because the ground floor felt even more oppressive. As he passed the locked door, he was not intentionally looking at it, but a sudden sound made him stop. Knock. Very soft. A single rap from the other side of the door. Min stood motionless. He thought the rain had tricked him. Knock, knock. 2 more, evenly spaced, as if fingertips were testing the wood. His heart jerked in his chest. "Who's there?" he blurted out. The moment the question left his mouth, Min regretted it. Hao's warning flashed through his mind. But too late. The other side went still for a few seconds. Then there came a very faint scraping sound, drawn slowly from top to bottom, thin and harsh, like fingernails dragged gently across the wood. Scrape? Once. Then a second time. Min backed away 2 steps. The entire hallway was freezing. The air had thickened, grown so heavy he felt as if each breath had to be forced through an invisible layer of water. The door in front of him remained shut and unmoving, yet he could not rid himself of the feeling that something was standing very close on the other side. Its head pressed exactly where he had placed his ear that afternoon. Listening to him breathe and understanding that he had heard it, Min turned and hurried into the bedroom, locked the door, and switched on the light. The rain outside grew heavier and heavier. He lay on the bed with his mind painfully alert. It took more than an hour before exhaustion dragged him into a fitful sleep full of broken images. He dreamed he was standing in the second-floor hallway under a blue-gray darkness. At the far end was the locked door. In front of it stood a woman with her back to him. Long hair hanging loose over a thin back. She wore an old white blouse soaked through as if she had just walked in the rain. For some reason Min knew with absolute certainty that she was kin to him. Though he had never seen her, she knocked on the door very softly, patiently, the way one knocked on a room in one's own home. Each time she knocked, the door swelled inward slightly as if something beyond it were breathing out. Min wanted to call out but could make no sound. The woman suddenly turned her head. Her face was veiled by wet black hair plastered to it. Strand by strand the hair separated, revealing a face with no eyes, no nose, only a long crack running from forehead to chin. Exactly like a small door half closed in skin. Min jerked awake. The room was pitch black. The light had gone out at some point. The rain had also lessened. Only the digital clock on his phone glowed faintly by the bed, 3:17. Then he heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow. Heavy. Dragging. One by one they came to a stop in front of his door. Min held his breath. His whole body felt cold as ice water. He stared at the gap beneath the door. A darkness deeper than the rest appeared there, proving that something was standing outside, blocking the light. A voice spoke. Min. His father's voice. Impossible to mistake. The slight rasp at the end of the word. The slow, weary rhythm. This was exactly his father's voice. "Min, open the door for me." A current of numb terror ran from the nape of his neck down his spine. His father had been buried less than a week ago. Min himself had closed his eyes, placed the altar portrait, watched the coffin lowered into the grave. There was no possibility that he was standing outside this door. Yet the voice came again, clear as day, so close that it seemed the speaker's mouth was pressed against the crack under the door. "I'm so cold." Min clenched his teeth, wrapping both arms around his knees until his knuckles blanched. He remembered Hao's warning. No matter whose voice it is, don't answer. His throat was dry and burning. His heart hammered until his chest hurt. Outside the door, his father's voice became softer, closer, sorrowful enough to make the heart ache. "I know you're angry with me, but open it for me." Then suddenly, at the end of those words, there came a thin, high laugh, sharp enough to pierce, as if someone were trying to imitate human laughter using a throat no longer intact. Min shuddered so violently he nearly burst into tears. He clamped his hands over his ears and squeezed his eyes shut. A little while later, the dragging footsteps moved away from his room, slowly crossing the hallway and disappearing. The next morning, Min decided not to wait any longer. He told himself he had to leave the house immediately. Everything could be explained by panic, dreams, stress from the funeral, but he did not need to stay to prove that. He packed his things in a hurry. Yet just as he was about to go downstairs, he discovered that his wallet had vanished. He had left it on the table by the bed the previous night. He tore the room apart, then searched the other 2 rooms as well, but found nothing. He went downstairs and searched there too. Still nothing. At last, as he passed the altar room, he stopped dead. The wallet lay neatly in the middle of the altar, in front of the cold incense bowl, as if someone had just gently placed it there. Min stood frozen for several seconds. Cold sweat drenched his back. He stepped forward and picked up the wallet. The money and papers were still there, but the note his father had left was gone. In its place was another scrap of paper, yellowed, torn at the edges, on which a line had been written in brown ink like dried blood. "It learns voices quickly. Don't listen. Don't look. If the lock cracks, burn the whole house." Below it was a name, Knock. Min had never heard his father mention anyone named Knock. The note made everything in him come to a halt. He took it down to the grocery shop and asked the woman from yesterday. The instant she saw the handwriting, her face changed, her eyes widening in terror. "Where did you find this?" "In my wallet." She sat silent for a long while, then drew him down onto a chair and lowered her voice as though afraid that if she spoke too loudly, something far away might hear. Knock was his father's older sister. Before he fled the village, the family had lived in that house on the hill. Min's grandfather had been a wood carver, while his grandmother practiced rituals of warding and containment for the villagers. Cursed objects, malevolent charms, hair and nails of the dead, grave goods stolen from tombs, things no one dared keep in their homes, were secretly brought to her to deal with. People said she knew how to lock evil things away so they would not follow their owners home. She had lived off that work for years, until one day she brought back some strange object from deep in the forest. No one knew exactly what it was. All anyone knew was that from that night on, she locked herself in the middle room upstairs with that object for 3 days. On the 4th day she came out with her face gray as ash, eyes sunken as if she had not slept for a month. She locked the door with 3 layers of locks, plastered charms all over the frame, and warned the entire family that no matter what they heard from inside, they were never to open it. 3 nights later, Min's grandmother hanged herself from the 2nd floor staircase. Beneath her feet lay shredded scraps of charms and 10 fingertips slick with blood, the nails broken off almost to the quick. From that day on his grandfather lost his mind. In the daytime he sat in front of the locked door, muttering to whatever was behind it. At night he spoke to it. Less than half a month later he disappeared. People found his legs in the backyard, from the knees down, but the upper half of his body was never seen again. His Aunt Knock, not yet 20 at the time, did not believe in ghosts or demons. She thought the entire household had been poisoned by fear and superstition. One night Knock stole the key and opened the locked door. And then what? Min asked, though his insides had already gone cold. The shopkeeper swallowed. According to your father, he was still little then, hiding under a bed and looking out into the hallway. He saw his sister standing in front of the door for a very long time. When the door opened, the darkness inside was so deep it did not look like a room at all. It looked like a bottomless black pit. Knock stood there staring into it for a while, and then she began to smile. Not smiling because she was afraid, smiling like she had just seen the person she had wanted most in the world. Then she stepped inside. The door closed on its own. She died in there? The woman slowly shook her head. Near dawn, your father saw Knock sitting in the hallway. But whatever was sitting there was no longer his sister. She said the thing wearing Knock's face sat hunched on the floor, head tilted sharply as if nearly touching one shoulder, hair hanging over its face. When Min's father quietly called, "Sister?" it raised its head very slowly and smiled. Its mouth split all the way to its ears, and inside clung a black slime like mud dredged from the bottom of a long stagnant pond. Then it climbed onto the ceiling with both hands and feet, quick and light as a giant spider, ran the length of the hall, and vanished into the dark. Not long afterward, Min's father fled the village carrying the key and never returned. By the time Min finished listening, his palms were slick with sweat. Part of him still resisted, telling itself these were stories embroidered from collective fear. But the wallet on the altar, the sound of his father's voice the night before, the knocking behind the door, all of it was gathering into a single great black weight inside his chest. He should have left immediately. Yet instead, driven by some dark impulse he could not understand, Min climbed back to the house that same afternoon. His curiosity about the thing his father had feared all his life, about the aunt he had never known, about the secret the whole family had buried deeper than their graves, overcame his reason. This time he searched more thoroughly. In the small storage space under the stairs, behind a rotten wooden cabinet, he discovered a section of wall roughly boarded over. Inside was an old iron trunk. The lock had rusted so badly it gave way at a touch. In the trunk were several notebooks wrapped in oilcloth, some crumbling talismans, a blackened silver necklace, and an old family photograph. The photo had been taken in front of the house. His grandfather sat in a chair, face severe. His grandmother stood behind him, gaunt and dark. A young woman, very beautiful, stood at the right, surely Aunt Knock, the skinny little boy beside her, eyes full of fear. Had to be his father. At first Min only glanced at it, but when he leaned closer, eyes shot up his spine. In the upstairs window behind the family, a pale hand clung to the frame. The fingers were long, and there were 6 of them. The first notebook was his grandmother's. The writing was dense and rigid, mixed with many symbols Min could not read. But among the yellowed pages, a few lines remained clear. It will not stay still inside the vessel. The thing within is not a ghost, not a possessing spirit. It never died. Therefore it cannot be sent away by ritual. It calls with the listener's own memory. One answer is enough for it to know the path. Do not look at what calls from behind the door. The second notebook was his father's, written when he was still a child. The handwriting was clumsy, and many pages were water-stained, as if written while crying. Min read with a tightening in his chest. His father wrote that after the grandmother's death, the door had begun calling each family member by name. At first it was the grandmother's voice, then the grandfather's, then knocks after the night she opened the door. It did not merely imitate sound. It knew things only the family could know. It repeated the smallest secrets, the most casual remarks, things no one could have heard except the one being called. Sometimes in the middle of the night it would wake the child who was his father and whisper, "Come here, I hid your marble in the crack in the wall." Sometimes it said, "It's mother. Open the door. I'm cold." Every voice was so real it was unbearable. The last page held only a few crooked lines, as if written in panic. It does not stay in the room. The lock can block the door but not its voice. Tonight I heard sister standing in the yard, but I still heard sister speaking from inside the room. There are 2 sisters, or there is no sister left at all. When Min lifted his head from the notebook, the sky outside had darkened. He did not know how long he had been sitting there. The whole house was gray with twilight. Wind hissed through the cracks like someone breathing hard. Then from above him, from the second-floor hallway, came a single very clear knock. This time Min did not start. A different cold, deeper than ordinary fear, had replaced it. He knew he should not stay. Yet he also knew things had gone too far. If he went down the hill and left, would it stop? Or had it already followed his name? His father's voice? His own bloodline? That thought raised gooseflesh all over him. He opened the bike's compartment and took out the spare can of gasoline. There was now only one intent left in his mind: if the lock cracked, burn the whole house. When he climbed back to the second floor, holding the gas can and a lighter, his legs suddenly locked. The padlock had changed. Across the black rusted metal ran a web of fresh cracks. Around the keyhole seeped a dark liquid, thick and glossy like oil. It dripped onto the floor in slow drops, giving off a sweet, fishy smell that made Min want to vomit. Then his father's voice came from behind the door. "You're back." The voice was calm to the point of horror. Not shaking, not distorted. Exactly his father's voice when he had still been healthy, low, dry, and faintly weary. "Don't do that." Min stood paralyzed. "I know you're holding gasoline," the voice said more gently. "Don't burn it. I'm here." Min gripped the handle of the can tighter. "You're not my father." Silence. After a moment the voice spoke again. Strangely sad. "You're still angry because I hid our family's past from you?" Min's spine went cold. That was exactly the thought he had had that afternoon while reading the notebook. He had never spoken it aloud. "I've held it back for a long time." The voice behind the door continued. "But I can't hold it alone anymore. You have to open the door and help me." "Help with what?" "Just look at me once." At that exact moment something slammed hard against the inside of the door. Bang. Then again. Bang. Beneath the door, more of the black fluid began to ooze out. Thick as blood mixed with mud. The air in the hallway dropped so cold that his breath showed as a pale white mist. He remembered the line in his grandmother's notebook. "It calls with the listener's own memory." Min twisted open the gas can and poured a long stream over the door. The wall. The floor. Instantly the voice behind the door changed. It was no longer his father. A young woman's voice burst out. High and frantic. "Don't. It's me. Sister, knock. Open it for me." Bang. Bang. Then an old woman's sobbing voice. "It's Mother. I'm in so much pain." Then a strange man's hoarse whisper. "Help me." Then others piled over one another. Men, women, old, young, all mixed together as if a crowd were jamming itself behind the door, trampling each other to get out first. "Men, don't burn it. It's behind you. Open it." The last voice made his hands shake violently. It was his own. He heard himself, exactly himself, sobbing and begging from the other side of the door. "Please open it. I'm trapped in here." The door shuddered as if something enormously heavy had hurled itself against it. The lock gave a dry cracking sound. The fractures across the metal widened. The handle turned slowly. Min struck the lighter. A small blue flame sprang up in his trembling fingers. The door opened a thin slit. From the crack there came no light. Only darkness packed so thick it looked like a black liquid compressed behind the door. In that darkness Min saw an eye opening. It was too white, too large, with a pupil no more than a tiny black dot. Its surface glistened wetly, and reflected in it was Min's face standing outside the door, but the reflection was smiling. Slowly, broadly, though in reality his lips had not moved. Min threw the lighter. The fire caught the gasoline and exploded into a streak of flame that raced down the hallway. The door flew open. A blast of appalling cold struck him in the face. So cold it felt as though the skin were peeling from his bones. Out of the darkness something crawled to the threshold. At first it had no stable human shape. It was like a mass of black flesh constantly molding itself into different forms. In one place it bulged into a woman's face with long wet hair. In another it sank inward, revealing white teeth set haphazardly inside a lipless mouth. Long, thin, pallid arms thrust out from among the shadows. Fingers too long, nails black, scraping the floor with a shriek that stabbed at the ears. Every time the fire licked across it, more faces rose on its surface and sank again, all of them opening their mouths, yet producing only one warped sound, shrill and twisted like children laughing at the bottom of a well. Min turned and ran down the stairs. Behind him it came crawling after him, the sound of it reverberating across the ceiling. The walls, as if it were moving not in one direction but across every surface at once. Flames caught the curtains, the frames, the dry beams overhead. Black smoke poured down the staircase. Min reached the living room just as the front door slammed shut with a crash. He hurled himself against it and yanked frantically. But the heavy door would not move, as though locked from outside. Smoke flooded his throat, making him choke. At that moment, in the middle of the red-lit smoke, a figure stood at the far end of the room. His father. Not vague, not distorted, clear enough to hurt. He wore the old gray cloth clothes. His face was hollow, eyes deep-set, skin pale as it had been in the coffin. But it was his father. Min recognized him instantly from the slightly stooped shoulders, the sinewy hands, and the small scar by the chin. "Father," Min choked out. The man looked at him for a very long time, and in his gaze there was a weariness so profound it no longer seemed human. "Don't let it get out of the house," he said. "Are you real or?" He did not answer that question. His gaze lifted to the ceiling. Min looked too. On the smoke-darkened beams, the thing was crawling upside down like some gigantic creature. Countless arms gripping the wood. The front of it now wore the face of the young woman from the old photograph. Beautiful but split from the mouth to the temple. Behind that face, other faces surfaced and sank. An old woman with bulging eyes. A man with no lips. A grinning child. Then Min's own face, stretched and twisted in pain. "Go through the back door," his father shouted. It hasn't remembered the back door yet. That shout jolted Min awake from his paralysis. He ran for the kitchen. Behind him came the wet, fleshy sound of the thing dropping from the ceiling onto the floor. His father stepped between it and Min. In the brief second when Min looked back, he saw the black mass had nearly filled half the room. All the faces rising from it with their eyes open and fixed on him. While his father stood before it motionless. A thin shadow about to be swallowed. Min kicked the back door open and stumbled out into the rain. Slipping in the mud, as he scrambled up, he heard behind him a scream unlike anything in the world. It was at once dozens of people screaming, metal grinding on stone, and someone laughing and sobbing through a throat full of water. Then a tremendous blast shook the ground. The rear overhang of the house collapsed in a sea of flame. The villagers only dared come up when the fire rose high enough to be seen from below. They found Min at the foot of the slope, bloodless-faced, clawing at the earth until his nails had torn away. No one asked much. They only fought the blaze until dawn. By morning the house was reduced to a charred frame, split walls, and a collapsed roof. Everyone thought it was over. Until they saw what had been revealed beneath the ashes in the exact spot where the locked room had stood. Not the floor. Another door. A black iron door lying horizontally beneath the floor. More like a hatch than a room door. The metal was covered in strange, twisting symbols like broken script. Along the edges were innumerable scratches from fingernails. Some ran from the outside inward, others from the center out toward the edges. As if for years there had always been something on both sides of that door trying to get to the other. The shopkeeper from the village was helped up to look, and after one glance her knees buckled. Stammering, she finally managed to say, "So the upstairs door was only a false door. So the thing was never really kept in that room." 3 days later, officials from the district came to inspect. They pried the iron hatch open with crowbars while Min stood at a distance, throat locked tight. When the hatch came loose, a cold, fishy smell rushed upward and made several workers retch. Below was a square pit lined with old green stone, deeper than 3 meters. There were no steps, only 4 iron hooks fixed into the 4 corners of the walls as though they had once been used to secure something, or someone. At the bottom was a layer of black sludge, thick as grave mud mixed with dried blood. When they shone lights into it, they saw fragments of bone, human teeth, a child's silver bracelet, clumps of long hair matted together, and a large shattered iron lock. But what chilled everyone were the marks on the walls, from the bottom of the pit to the mouth of the hatch. The stone was covered in scratches, so many that even the rock had been worn away. That night, one of the workers who had gone down into the pit hanged himself in the guest house. Before dying, he wrote a single sentence on the wall in charcoal. "It isn't in the pit. It's in the voice that calls." After that, no one wanted to touch the property again. The authorities used the excuse of structural danger, poured concrete over the entire foundation, and put up a warning sign. The villagers began avoiding the road up the hill altogether, and Min returned to the city nearly broken, carrying with him the certainty that something had touched him. First came the knocking, exactly at 3:17 every night. Knock, knock, knock. Sometimes from the wall above his bed, sometimes from the back of the wardrobe, sometimes from inside the bathroom door. He changed where he slept, and the knocking moved with him. He stayed at a friend's house, in hotels, in boarding houses. The knocking always came at the exact time, with the exact rhythm, not a minute early or late. Then came the mirrors. Min began avoiding looking into them for too long, because sometimes the reflection lagged half a beat behind him. Sometimes he turned away and the figure in the mirror remained staring. One night, while washing his face, he saw his father standing behind him in the mirror. Not a vague blur, but clear down to each crease at the corners of his eyes. Min spun around. There was nothing behind him. But when he turned back to the mirror, the figure in it had not yet finished turning to follow him. It stood behind his reflection, head slightly tilted, lips lifting in a smile that did not belong to his father. He quit his job. He slept by day and stayed awake at night. He saw doctors. They said post-traumatic disorder. He went to temples, churches, spirit mediums. Some, the instant they heard him mention the door, slammed their doors in his face. One old medium stared at him for a long time and then placed a small mirror wrapped in red cloth before him, saying softly, "Never look into a mirror at 3:17. And remember, the thing following you may not be the thing that crawled out of the door. It may be the part of you that stood looking into it for too long." The words lodged in his mind like a hook. One night in heavy rain, exactly at 3:17, the knocking came again from the apartment door. Knock, knock, knock. Min sat motionless on the bed in the dark. The small mirror the medium had given him lay face down under his pillow. He could hear breathing outside the door. Not quick, not rushed, but slow and patient, as if whatever was there knew with certainty that eventually any human being would grow exhausted and weak enough to soften. Then his father's voice spoke. "You burned the wrong one." Min went rigid. I'm still out here." His hand clenched the edge of the bed until the skin split. That was the deepest fear inside him. The thing he had never dared think through completely. What if the apparition of his father in the burning house had been real? What if he had stayed behind to block it and save Min? What if the thing that died in the flames was not the monster, but the last fragment of his father that remained? Outside the door, the voice continued, gentle enough to break the heart. "If you want to know whether it was real or not, just open the door once." There came a faint scratching of nails on wood. "I miss you." Min trembled violently. Tears spilled without his knowing whether they came from fear or grief. But somewhere deep in his head, his father's voice from memory sounded again, dry and flat as it had been in life. "There are things you cannot escape simply by going far away." Min slowly took the mirror from under his pillow. Still keeping it face down, he stepped toward the door and stopped when he felt the cold from the crack brushing his bare feet. Outside, everything went silent as if listening. Min drew one long breath and said in a hoarse voice, each word steady, "I do not invite you in." The instant the sentence ended, the door shook violently. A warped scream burst from outside. No longer his father's voice but dozens of voices tangled together. Male and female, old and young, high and low, all mixed as if a mass of corpses were speaking through one enormous throat. Nails clawed frantically at the wood. Min squeezed his eyes shut and pressed the face-down mirror hard against the door. A sharp, tearing shriek split the air, straight through his skull. Then suddenly everything stopped. Nothing but rain. Nothing but Min's heart pounding wildly in his chest. From that night onward, the knocking grew less frequent. Sometimes weeks passed without it. Sometimes it returned without warning on cold rainy nights or during power outages. Min learned to live with it as one lives with a wound beneath the skin. Unseen but permanent, he never stayed anywhere too long. He never hung a mirror opposite his bed. He never opened the door to any voice calling after midnight. He never answered when he heard the dead speak. He never stared too long into dark corners. And most of all, he never touched any locked door without first knowing exactly why it had been locked. Many years passed. The land where the old house in Ki Suong had stood was partly leveled to make way for a road. They buried the old foundation beneath concrete, stone, and asphalt. People thought that would bury the story too. But from the day the road was completed, accidents began happening one after another on the bend nearby. Drivers who survived said that just before they lost control, in the mist they saw a black door standing upright in the middle of the road. And from behind it came the soft sound of someone knocking. As if pleading, as if inviting, as if waiting only for someone to stop. Step out, place a hand on the knob, and try turning it out of curiosity. Min never returned. But on rare nights when the city was drowned in rain, when the power failed, and every room suddenly seemed deeper and darker than usual, he still lay in the dark and heard from somewhere around him, perhaps in the wall, in the wardrobe, behind the mirror, or even within his own chest, the familiar 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. After the 3rd knock, there was always a very long silence. Then a low, gentle, terribly patient voice, as though it knew perfectly well that if it only waited long enough, any human being would one day grow tired, lonely, weak enough and would eventually want to know what was truly standing behind the locked door. Just once. Min had never opened it. But the longer he lived, the more he understood that the most horrifying thing was not what had once been locked behind that door, but the fact that from the moment you heard it call in the exact voice of the person you loved most, that door was no longer in the old house on the hill. It was in your mind. It was in memory. It was in guilt, in curiosity, in the hunger to look one more time and know the truth. And once that door had appeared inside a person, the thing behind it needed only to knock. Very softly. Very steadily. Until at last, the person on this side of the door would become the one to open it with their own hands.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.